You know, there's a question that people have been asking for thousands of years, and I think they've been approaching it all wrong. Not in a bad way, just they're looking in the wrong place. They keep looking up at the sky, or inside ancient books, or at each other with this kind of desperate hoping. And the answer, or at least a piece of it, a real piece of it, is sort of sitting right there on the kitchen table. The question is, what happens to you when you die? Now, I don't mean that in the religious sense. I'm not going to tell you about heaven or souls or what comes after. I genuinely don't know about those things, and I want to be honest with you about that from the start. What I do know something about is atoms. And once you start really thinking about atoms, the whole question gets, well, it gets kind of marvelous, actually. So let's start simple. You, right now, sitting wherever you are made of atoms. Something like 7 octillion of them. That's a 7 with 27 zeros after it, which is a number so big it stops meaning anything when you say it out loud. But here's the thing. Every single one of those atoms, every carbon atom in your bones, every oxygen atom moving through your blood right now, every iron atom that makes your blood red, all of those atoms have been around for an extraordinarily long time. Billions of years, most of them longer than the Earth itself. And here's what gets me. Here's what I genuinely cannot stop thinking about when I lie awake at night. Those atoms were never created by you. You didn't make them. You borrowed them. Now wait, I don't mean borrowed in some vague, poetic sense. I mean, it almost literally. You took those atoms temporarily from somewhere else. From the air you breathe. From the water you drink. From the food you eat. Which came from plants which pulled carbon right out of the atmosphere. Which before that was inside somebody else. Or something else. I mean, the carbon atoms in your left hand might have been inside a dinosaur. They might have been part of a tree that fell over in a forest 300 million years ago. They've been dissolved in seawater. They've been in volcanic rock. They've been inside stars, and not just one star either, because the really heavy stuff, the iron, the calcium, the oxygen, all of that was actually cooked up inside a massive star that exploded before our sun was even born. You are, in a very real and physical sense, made of exploded star. I remember when I was a kid, my father used to take me for walks in the woods near our house. And he had this particular way of pointing at things and asking me questions instead of telling me the answers. He'd find a dead bird on the ground and he'd crouch down next to it and he'd say, "Richie, what do you think happens to it now?" And I'd say, "Well, it goes away, it disappears." And he'd get this little smile. He'd say, "Nothing goes away, watch the ground, watch what comes up from the ground." And then over the next few weeks, he'd have me look at the same spot and there'd be new growth coming up and insects. And he'd say, "See? It's still here, it just changed shape." And that stuck with me. Nothing goes away. That's not poetry, by the way, that's chemistry. So now, here's what I want you to do. Imagine you could follow a single carbon atom through time. Just one. Let's say this atom starts inside a star, a massive star, billions of degrees inside, protons slamming into each other so hard they just snap together and form heavier elements. Carbon comes out of that. Your carbon came out of that. Then the star explodes in this unimaginable flash, and the atom drifts around in a cold gas cloud for maybe 1 billion years, barely doing anything, just jiggling around very slowly in the near absolute zero dark. Then our solar system forms, the Earth coalesces, oceans form, and some tiny living thing, some little protobacterium floating in a warm, shallow sea, absorbs that atom into its body. Now it's part of something alive for the first time in all that time. That organism gets eaten. Things die and decompose, the atom goes into the sediment, gets compressed into rock over millions of years, a volcanic eruption releases it back into the atmosphere, a tree in what will eventually become Brooklyn absorbs it, a kid eats an apple from that tree and now it's inside a human being, maybe for the first time inside you for a few decades, and then you die, and that atom keeps going, doesn't even notice, if you'll forgive me saying so. Because the thing that dies, the thing that actually ends, is not the atoms. The atoms were never alive in the way we mean when we say alive. What is alive, what is temporary, is the pattern, the arrangement. This incredibly specific and complicated, and honestly rather unlikely organization of all those atoms that is you, that is any particular person. When you die, the process that was holding all of that together, the chemical reactions and electrical signals and all the fantastically complicated machinery of a living body, that process stops. And slowly, over days and months, the atoms find their way back into the larger system, into the soil, into the air, into bacteria, into grass, into other people. Some of your atoms, I mean the atoms you're using right now, will someday be inside other living human beings, inside people who haven't been born yet. Now, I realize that might sound depressing at first. Like I'm saying, you're just a temporary arrangement of borrowed parts, and when the arrangement ends, that's it. Nothing special happened. But I find it anything but depressing. As a matter of fact, I get a real kick out of thinking about it. Let me tell you why. I was in the hospital once some years ago, and a nurse asked me whether I was afraid of dying. And I sat with that question for a little while, genuinely turned it over. And I said, I'm not sure afraid is quite the right word for what I feel. It's more like curiosity. Because here's the thing that strikes me. Those 7 octillion atoms of yours and the entire history of the universe, which is a very long history, they have never once been arranged exactly this way before. Not once. Not in any galaxy, not at any time, not for even a moment. And they will never be arranged this way again. The universe is old and large, and those atoms have been in a lot of places and done a lot of things. They've been in stars and rocks and ancient seas and living creatures, but they have never, not one single time, come together to make precisely you. A person who has the exact memories you have of some unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. Who loves the specific people you love in the specific complicated way you love them. Who laughs at the particular things that make you laugh. That is not nothing. That is not a small thing. In fact, I find that completely, utterly astonishing. That is what gets you when you really think it through. The universe has been running for 13.8 billion years, and it has produced exactly one of you, and it will never produce another. And for a brief window of cosmic time, you get to be that. Now, I also want to think about the energy for a moment, because I think people forget about the energy. All the chemical energy that's been driving your cells, keeping your heart beating, letting your brain do whatever it is your brain does, all of that doesn't disappear either. Energy doesn't disappear, it transforms. The energy you're using right now was sunlight not very long ago. It became sugar in a plant. The plant got eaten. You ate something that ate something, and now it's electrical signals in your neurons. When you die, that energy gets released, warms the soil a little, gets absorbed by bacteria, moves up the food chain again. The energy that is currently right now powering your thoughts will someday be powering something else's thoughts, or warming a pond, or being radiated back out into space. It never stops. It just moves. Nothing is created. Nothing is destroyed. It just moves around. Now what about consciousness? What about the inner experience? The fact that there is something it feels like to be you, rather than a rock or a cloud of gas. I have to stop here and be really honest with you. I cannot explain that to you in terms of anything you're familiar with, because I don't understand it in terms of anything I'm familiar with, and I've thought about it a lot, and nobody really does. There's something that happens when you arrange atoms in this particular complicated way, with all the right kinds of molecules and all the right kinds of signals bouncing back and forth. Something happens that we call experience. That seems to be aware. That seems to feel things. Why that happens instead of nothing. Why there's something it's like to be alive rather than just chemistry ticking along in the dark. I genuinely don't know. That's the honest answer. It's one of the greatest unsolved mysteries we have. And I find that exciting rather than troubling, because it means there are still extraordinary things to figure out. So, what happens when you die? The pattern ends, the pieces go back, and those pieces are going on to have adventures that would take longer than the age of the universe to fully describe. Your atoms are going to be in oceans and forests and other living creatures. They're going to end up in other stars. Long after the sun has expanded into a red giant and swallowed this little planet, those atoms are still going to be out there doing things, being things, becoming things you cannot currently imagine. You were, for a very short time, what they were up to. This particular temporary arrangement of ancient and well-traveled matter, looking out at the rest of the universe with curiosity and wonder and love, and occasionally a kind of low-level, ordinary Tuesday boredom. And the universe running all this time produced you once. How is it that that is possible? How is it that matter can arrange itself in such a way that it looks back at itself and says, well, isn't that something? I find that the most curious thing of all, and I'll leave that one for you to think about.